Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Oh, we're going to dive deep into finding your weight loss code, even just health code today. And my guest, this is his specialty. He is known as TC Hale in the health world, which stands for, I just found out, Tony Christopher Hale, but he does prefer the TC Hale. He is a natural health and nutrition author who teaches people how to look at their unique bio-individuality to get to the root cause of a health issue. He writes books like Kick Your Fat in the Nuts and teaches workshops to health professionals in more than 40 countries. You can find him at kickitnaturally.com. He's got 3 podcasts, which I'll let him tell you all about. Welcome, TC Hale. Tony
Karen,
Christopher.
Yeah, what an amazing intro. I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
Me too.
Yeah, it better be good, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you're just like, you've got so much information. I was just telling him before we started, I'm like, I could ask you about so many different topics because his podcast even has, the one I was just looking at, over 300 episodes with all of my favorite topics inside of it. Right. So you guys are going to have to check it out. I love it. I love it, TC. So what's the story behind the TC over the Tony Christopher?
Well, my name's Tony Hale. That's always been my name. But if you Google Tony Hale, you'll find like 300,000 pictures of Buster Bluth from Arrested Development. So he's an actor, Tony Hale. He's on,
and I love
VP
Arrested
and all that kind of
stuff. Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So when I became an author, I was like, oh, I got to have a different name. So I actually ran into Tony at a Whole Foods in LA. And I walked up to him and I didn't say a word. I just handed him my driver's license. And he looked at it, he was like, oh, no way. And so we got to talking and we became friends. He was a client of mine and all this kind of stuff. And so he's a great guy, but that's kind of why I go by TC, just so people can find me.
Yeah. Good call. That's great.
Right.
So you went from being a comedian, a director as well.
Well, producer, and I basically started out doing stand-up and touring professionally. I think that's how most natural health experts start off, is just doing stand-up, right?
Yeah. Well, now the pressure's on. You're going to have to be funny. So just so you know. Right. And then what made you, what happened? How did you become this nutrition author and talking about, kicking your fat in the nuts?
Right. Well, I was touring and doing stand-up and I lost my voice and it just didn't come back. So it was probably, it was like 6 years that I spent trying to get this back. And so basically after 23 doctors couldn't figure it out and each one was just making me worse, I kind of just told them all to piss off. I'm just going to figure this out myself. I'm done with you guys. And so I just kind of went nuts and I became a complete psycho researcher. And that's like all I did. And I was flying around the country, going to any kind of nutrition or health, seminar or workshop or whatever I could find to learn anything I could. And as I went along and I was finding my own answers, I kept coming across things that my friends were dealing with. And I'd be like, oh, I bet that's why Tom has that problem. And I would tell him, if you do this, maybe you won't have to sit on the toilet 12 times a day. So let's look at this and look at your, physiology and stuff. And we'd run these tests. And sure enough, it would fix his problem and he could poop like a champion, once or twice a day. It wasn't like a problem. And then, so my friends just kept sending people to me like, oh, you got to help me find this. And it wasn't until this guy emailed me and he's like, look, I'll pay you $500 to help me fix my insomnia, because I had helped his friend fix his insomnia. And I was like, oh, this is a business. I didn't realize that that's what was going on. And that's kind of how I got started. And I was working with all these celebrity clients in LA before I even got my voice back. I couldn't even talk and I was still helping people fix their stuff. It was quite insane. It was kind of fun. They'd come by and I made like these laminated cards that I would just kind of hold up with questions on them about symptoms they were having and stuff. And they'd tell me about it and I would type in other questions to them. And then I just talked to them through email, helping them fix their stuff. And That's just kind of how it got started. Kind of
That's
weird,
interesting. And
right?
now you've got 3 podcasts, so you're talking for a living.
I talk a little bit. Yeah, I talk a little bit now. I
And
get a
so
little chatty.
why did you lose your voice, do you think?
Well, it turns out that my shoes were on too tight.
Oh,
No.
there's the comedian in you.
Can you imagine if that was what it was? I'd be pretty mad if that was the case. But I had an iron overload issue called
Oh,
hereditary hemochromatosis. It's
yes.
kind of where your body kind of absorbs too much iron than you need to the levels that it becomes like a toxic heavy metal would. And
Yeah.
so I had a lot of inflammation issues. I had a hiatal hernia that was creating some reflux problems. That was kind of burning my vocal cords. So the combination of those things kind of made a magic formula where I just got to shut up for years.
Wow. And emotionally, did you ever look into that, like chakra wise?
Yeah, it wasn't just 23 doctors. I was going to all kinds of people. I was
Yeah.
going to the best speech therapists in the country and witch doctors and whatever I could swing by and check out. I was looking into it. And so there was a lot of searching and a lot of finding other answers before I found my own.
Right. Yeah. Because I know for myself, like I had to look in because of my thyroid, looking into just the energetic symbolism of the throat and the throat chakra, which is your voice, like literally your voice of have you suppressed what you've really wanted to say or do and
Right.
speak about in your life. And to me, it sounds like life was like, actually, you're not supposed to be a comedian. You're supposed to be
Supposed to
over
shut up
here.
and
So we're just
doing this
gonna,
stuff.
yeah, we're just gonna shut down your voice until you go on this other path,
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to
which,
set you up so that you can do this
right?
instead. And that's really how it worked out. Yeah.
Yeah, we think that these things, when they happen, they're the worst things that could possibly happen to us. But then you look back and you think that was the best thing that could have ever happened.
Right. Yeah. It kind of
Yeah,
just sends you on a different path and one that you enjoy a whole lot more too. Yeah. And so I
exactly.
haven't done stand up since. I've got my voice back, but
Yeah.
I'm just having too much fun with all the stuff I'm doing.
Yeah, I love it. It's very similar to my story too, in the sense that I was doing something I wasn't supposed to be doing. My body completely shut down on me. And it was funny because I started to, all my clients, I was doing body work and I would start to talk to them about all of their health problems and I'd be able to fix them. Same as you. Like, it'd be like, oh,
Right.
your digestion's, oh, you need to change your diet. You need to do this, this, and this. And it was, I'm sure I was very annoying to many of them because I would be offering up all this advice. Finally, I was like, okay, I got to stop this and actually go do what I'm supposed to be doing here.
Right. Right.
So let's talk about bio individuality because I know that that's really your thing.
That's my jam.
That's your jam. It's my
Yeah.
jam too. Tell me first off, what's bio individuality? What does that mean to you?
So basically, what it means to me, and the easiest way to explain it to somebody, is that there is no diet that's right for every person because we all process foods differently. And it kind of, for some people, it doesn't really matter what they're eating because their body can't process what they're eating. And everything that we can't process correctly, instead of becoming fuel and resources for the body to use for all this crazy stuff that it does, the body does all this stuff that we just don't understand what's going on. But it does all this crazy stuff and it needs fuel and resources to do it. And anything that we bring in that the body can't either utilize or remove becomes this burden and is basically like a toxin to the body. So we kind of need for people to understand that it's time to stop looking at the symptom that a person is dealing with and whatever disease that we have told them that they have. And we need to start looking at the person.
Mhm. Yeah. Especially when it comes to the different diets. I mean, there's so much dieting dogma out there. And I mean, it's as bad, I think, as religion.
Oh, geez. Yeah, it's really getting that way.
It
Yeah, I don't,
is.
it's almost like you don't want to talk to anybody about politics, religion, vaccines, or diet. Like you just stay away from
Exactly.
those and you can be friends.
Yep. Yep. I aired a podcast recently that was called The Dark Side of Keto, Fasting, and OMAD, one
Yeah.
meal a day.
And so, have you stopped getting the hate mail yet?
Well, I was just going to say, went out last night. The actual email campaign went out last night, and I got an immediate message from someone I hadn't heard of from years. This guy that was in a group that I was in, and he's like, I've been doing it for 2 years. I feel really great with no negative side effects, but I'll listen to the podcast. And I'm like,
Right.
well, buddy, great. So happy it's working for you. But guess what? It's not
Yeah.
working for a lot of other people. So,
Right.
so tell
And
me
it,
about that, because I know you have a podcast actually kind of around that topic.
yeah, I do have a keto podcast. It's called Chat the Fat. And the main thing to understand is that it can get really tricky because everybody's experienced this. You know, Mom, my friend lost 30 pounds on this diet and I gained 20. You know, what's going on with that? So they feel like they just must be broken and that maybe I'm just stuck this way. But the reality is that you're likely using a diet that is not right for your specific bio individuality. And there's a couple of different components that are really important to this. And the first one is digestion. And we kind of got to break it down a little bit to get into this. You feel like breaking some stuff
I
down?
do.
You feel sciencey?
Yeah, I do.
Okay,
Definitely.
let's get
do it.
sciencey just for a minute. Um, so when we eat food, and there's a lot of things that go on with the digestive process, but the two things that are the most important is that when the food goes into our stomach, we make hydrochloric acid or stomach acid. And that's what helps us start to break that food down. So we need that to be happening. And there's a lot of people for a wide variety of reasons that don't have the ability to make stomach acid or enough stomach acid. And you don't have to be taking a PPI or some type of medication to turn it off. There's a lot of other reasons that the body won't be able to make enough stomach acid. So
Isn't it true too? Like if you don't eat a lot of protein or you're a vegetarian or vegan, your body will actually stop producing as much hydrochloric acid.
yeah, and it's because its focus is more on protein is when we need more hydrochloric acid because it's really made to break that down. So here's the tricky part is that once that food is acidified, it leaves the stomach and goes into the duodenum, which is like the first few inches of the small intestine. And then up above that is where we keep our gallbladder. That's where I keep mine. I just keep it there.
Yeah, me too.
Good. So the liver takes all this filth out of the body and it puts it in the bile, and then it stores that bile in the gallbladder where it gets concentrated. So this bile is like a soapy substance, and it squirts down onto this acid product that's leaving the stomach, and then this alkaline bile is hitting this acid product from the stomach. So that's very different. So when they collide, it creates like this explosion. It's like the volcano that you made in this fourth grade. You know, you had vinegar and baking soda, and it sizzled and it came up. Did you see that? I get an A. Well, that's just a reaction of very acid hitting very alkaline. So that's what we want. It's that sizzle that creates this explosion that breaks all our food apart. And that's how we pull all these nutrients out of the food, because your body can't do anything with a peanut butter sandwich. It doesn't know what a peanut butter sandwich is. It has to break it down into vitamins and minerals and fats and amino acids, all these things that the body needs. So if we don't have the ability to break that down, then the body can't really use all the nutrients in that food. So if either the stomach acid is not being produced, or the bile has become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, if either of those sides are missing, you don't get that sizzle. You don't get the full ability to break the food apart and pull the nutrients out. So we're kind of living in this situation because our food accidentally became garbage, and the way that we farm it accidentally became horrific, and it doesn't allow the food to have the nutrients that it did even 60 years ago. I mean, a tomato is not what it was 60 years ago. It just doesn't have the same nutrients. So we're eating food that has fewer nutrients in it. And a lot of us don't have the ability to pull all the nutrients out of that food. So you can see that, I mean, it kind of turns out where a lot of people are just starving, and They're not getting what the body needs. And so you send this food in. And so the body's like, whoo, here comes food. Let's do this. And it's starting to break it down. And it's like, we're finally going to get what we need. And then, hey, what happened to the food? You said there was going to be stuff. I need the stuff. And so since the nutrients don't come in, the body's like, hey, can you give me some more? And the person just continues to eat and eat and eat because the body's telling the person, hey, you got to eat. They're getting the cravings and they're getting the signals that they need more, but it's just because of their inability to pull the nutrients out that the body is really needing. So that's a really big piece of the puzzle.
That's a great way to break it down. That wasn't sciencey actually at all. Just so you know, that's perfect.
I snuck in a science. I'm sneaky sciencey.
So what you're saying though is when we as humans, we become nutrient deficient because we're not absorbing the vitamins and minerals and all the other good stuff out of the food we're eating, that will actually increase our hunger levels because the body's trying to get more nutrients in.
Well, sure. I mean, I'm going to exaggerate this so that it makes it easy to understand. If our mineral levels go very low, we can have a seizure. If our blood sugar goes very low, we can have a seizure. So when people have both mineral levels and their blood sugar going very low at the same time, that's a good kind of formula for seizures. And that doesn't mean that if both those things are low, they're about to have a seizure. They probably wouldn't happen for days or, without eating at all. It's just that the body's very defensive about that because it's like a shutdown of the whole system. So the body doesn't want that to happen. So way ahead of time, it sends the signal, hey, go get me some Nutter Butters, because Nutter Butters are the most nutritious thing that, I'm kidding. But the thing is, like, if a person if they don't have the stomach acid to break down like a steak or, a fish or some kind of protein, or they can't really pull all the nutrients out of vegetables, then they don't really have any fuel for the body to function. But Nutter Butters and all this processed junk, it's like it's broken down before you open the package. Like
Yeah.
it goes in and it's like instant glucose. It's like fuel right away. So when the body is in this emergency of, hey, we kind of got nothing down here. It's like, hey, remember that Chubby Hubby ice cream? Go get that. We turn that into fuel right away. And so they get this craving for Chubby Hubby ice cream, and they go and do that because the body's just trying to get through the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It has all these backup plans that it can use when the resources aren't coming in. And a lot of these backup plans over time create these symptoms and what we call diseases because the body's more concerned about not dying today. If we run out of stuff, we just die. So the body doesn't want that to happen. So it uses all these backup plans to get what it needs to function, and we get to function. Then over, time, we get to be a little bit broken the way we function.
So what are you seeing clinically then with the ketogenic diet when it doesn't work? Why do you think it doesn't work for some people? What's going on? Is that because they're not a lot of the time producing enough hydrochloric acid? Maybe how many people have no gallbladder,
Right.
Things like that.
Yeah. And one of the trickiest things with keto, and this is with a lot of really low carb, because, a low carb diet is a very effective way to lose weight for a lot of people because you're allowing insulin to come down. So a lot of people, most of your listeners, I'm sure, understand that, you want insulin to come down so your body can access stored fat. So low carb is great for that. Keto is very low carb. So you're really allowing insulin to come down. Yay. Right. So, but one huge problem is that bile that we talked about. There's a lot of things that can cause it to get a little too thick and sticky. And there's some imbalances that can do it. Processed foods can do it. Grains can do it. Elevated estrogen levels can really do it. Have you ever met anybody that was on birth control that raised estrogen levels? It's not a rare thing to see. So when things are thickening up the bile, it won't flow correctly. And the bile is what our body uses to emulsify or break down fats. And when we can't emulsify the fats, the body can't use them. So instead of giving your body all this fuel, you've provided your body another burden that has to try to figure out How can I get rid of this? I have an idea. I can shoot this out the back door as fast as possible and lift this person off the toilet like a rocket. That's one way. You know, you see all those people, they start keto and they're like, oh, this is really coming out of my butt quite quickly. You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
it's a problem. And this is one of those things that can be causing that problem is they don't have the bile flow to process fats. And now they're going to go on a high fat diet. Well, how's that going to work? It's going to be awful. They're going to gain weight. They're going to have the diarrhea. The body's going to take these fats and say, can I just push them out through the skin? And they're going to have a rash or something they call keto crotch and, you know, all these issues.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because that they're adapting a diet that worked great for their friend, even though they don't have the ability to even digest the foods on that diet. And the bigger problem is their food was screaming for carbs because that was the only thing that their system could even break down. They couldn't break down protein or digest fats. They were living off of carbs. And you just took that away. So you took away the only person's fuel source. And they're like lying on the couch and wondering why they feel like they have the keto flu.
Yeah.
You know, so we like to teach people how to look at their physiology and understand, you know, how it's operating. Does it look like I'm processing carbs better or am I processing fats better? Can I even break down protein or does it sit there in my stomach like a rock for 6 hours? And like the next day I'm like, you know, I'm still full. That steak is like still right there. And that's because it doesn't leave until it's broken down. So it has to break down by process of rotting and fermenting. And those processes create gases and toxins and make everything expand. And why do I look pregnant when I'm not pregnant? Or I'm a male and I still look pregnant? Why is that happening? So when you can understand how your body's operating, then you can either fix some things that would allow you to succeed on a ketogenic diet or a low carb diet. Or you could use a diet that's more appropriate for the way that your body is running now. So that's a big thing for when people are starting keto. Now, there's other things that can kick in further down the road too.
Yes, definitely. Yes, I see keto long term not doing very good things to women, not to men. Men can seem to go way longer before they get any repercussions from it. Women, though, I see it happening much sooner as far
Right.
as like just hormonally and stuff.
Well, women are fancier.
We're fancier.
You guys have a lot more equipment that does really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, making a human.
Yeah.
So the problem with all that equipment is that it's kind of needy and it needs a lot of resources to make that happen, which is why you see a lot of women who have digestive issues, or maybe they've done something like a diet that's not working for them too long. They start losing their period and oh, I'm going to go ahead and do menopause, even though I'm 27. I'm going to go ahead and knock that out.
Yeah.
And that's because they don't have enough resources to build a human being. So Mother Nature is just like, hey, you know what? We're going to just shut this down until you get the resources to do it. Because if they had a kid and that kid was born, by the time they were done, they would be a wreck and they would be dealing with all the postpartum depression or more severe things that can occur when they're just stripped of resources. And so Mother Nature says, hey, well, I'll help you out. I'll just shut this down and you don't have to worry about that. Because we see women all the time. I feel like I have 6 or 7 other kids beyond my own, just from women who have been trying to get pregnant and couldn't because they didn't have the capacity to pull nutrients out of the food they were eating. Right. Or they were doing some ridiculous diet. And well, this diet says that we eat on Thursdays, but only every other month on Thursdays. Other than that, we don't really eat, not food. We eat thoughts, but not food.
Yeah.
So they're doing things like this. And you're like, well, one idea would be to just stop it. Stop doing that and then let your body have some nutrients, and then maybe it will function like it's supposed to function.
I remember reading a book by Dr. Kate Shanahan and her saying that at where we are now, and she wrote this book probably 10, 15 years ago, she said, where we are now, we should be spacing our children out every 4 years because we are so nutrient deficient that
Right.
it takes that much for us to rebuild our nutrient stores after being pregnant.
Right. It
And
really
it
does.
did not used to be that way. We used to be able to do it, chuck them out quite quickly.
Right. And you see the women that they'll have their first kid and like, oh, that was a piece of cake. And then they'll
Yeah.
have another one a year later. And this time they're really sick and they can't stop vomiting and they can't get out of bed and all these issues because this time the body doesn't have the resources to build this human and allow your body to function the way that it's supposed to do. So it creates all these big problems.
And
And
postpartum depression.
right.
Yeah.
And the problem with the things that I'm just making fun of, the keto and fasting and OMAD and people going carnivore. The problem with all of these particular diets and even low carb to a certain degree is that they can be extremely effective to the point like we've never seen before in the world of weight loss.
Yep.
When the person can process those foods and they do that correctly and they're not creating a burden for their body. So when we see people like that happen, then we think that that's supposed to be the thing for everybody. But if a person either doesn't have the digestive capacity or they don't have the mineral content, because one thing that happens when you bring down the insulin levels so your body can burn stored fat all the time, yay. But another thing that happens is that a lot of people will pee out a lot more minerals when when insulin is very low. So some of these people didn't have a lot of minerals to start off with. And you can look at this by just looking at your blood pressure. You can get an idea of what's going on by where your blood pressure stands. Because when it's low, that's an indication that the mineral levels in the system are low. And they go to their doctor and they're like, hey, my blood pressure is 89 over 60. And he's like, great job, you're not going to have a blowout, you're not going to have a heart attack or a stroke, you're doing a fantastic job, nailed it. And they're like, well, I feel awful. Well, everything looks great here, I'm looking at your blood work, it's golden, see you later.
Yeah.
And they're like, but there's gills coming out of my neck, I don't think that's right. I don't think I'm supposed to have gills. And they just feel awful. But it's because the medical world is looking to stop a blowout. They don't understand that low blood pressure can equate to running around on flat tires all day and they feel awful. So this person that has low minerals will then go on a ketogenic diet that is going to cause their body to pee out more minerals, and it can really magnify a lot of the symptoms that they're dealing with. And that's a big problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it is so good for weight loss. And I always say that and it can be all of those diets can be extremely healing
For a lot of things.
for so many things, especially for the people that are coming from that standard American diet, who have leaky gut, who have autoimmune conditions. Like, the list goes on about how it can help. But what it also does is really suppress appetite. And then we start, especially if you're doing one meal a day, that's just naturally you're not eating very much when you're doing
and
that.
if they're coming from the standard American diet, the main benefit of OMAD is just, well, you're eating less Fritos. You're only eating Fritos once a day now. So that's a plus.
Yeah, I actually have some people that have said that to me that are like, I just eat whatever I want in just a 4-hour window. And I'm like,
Right.
I don't know if that's such a good idea. But
Yeah.
they start to run into problems because your body, if it's running on 700 calories a day, it's a matter of time before that. Yes, it's healing in the beginning because you're giving your system a break, but eventually, like you said, Mother Nature kicks in and says,
Right.
oh, you're a female, you're not supposed to be eating only 700 calories a day. You need to get pregnant and then procreate.
Yeah. Right. And
Let's
if a
shut down your
person
metabolism.
And if a person is doing that, with a ketogenic diet, when you start to do intermittent fasting, your body is running off of ketones already. It can run off of stored fat because you're producing these ketones and you're already fat adapted. Your body's good at accessing stored fat for fuel. So when you skip a meal, your body can be like, I got that. I'm going to get it over here off your thighs or wherever, that's what I'm going to do. But when people are doing this I eat one meal a day, whatever I want it to be. The rest of the day, their body doesn't have access to stored fat all the time. And depending on what they ate and how long it takes for insulin to come down, they may not be able to access stored fat at all. And if the other resources are low, the body has already freaked out and started elevating stress hormones because it's like, hey, one of its backup plans is to elevate these stress hormones that then tell the body to store more fat. We're in a famine. It's not going to burn fat. It's going to tell you to store fat. And then it's going to say, I'm not getting the resources I need, so I'm going to get them anyways. So I'm just going to break down these muscle tissues. And you know what? I'm going to go ahead and break down these lung tissues and these other organs. Well, guess what? You need your lungs. It's pretty key. You want to have your lungs. So when people are doing this OMAD, it's trouble. So with a ketogenic diet, an OMAD approach could be appropriate occasionally for a day, maybe twice a week at most, if everything else is really operating correctly. But when you start to do too much of that, especially multiple days in a row, then you're restricting too much of what's coming in, and your body's like, forget you, I'm going to get this myself. And the getting it myself process is going to create some major problems.
Wow. Yeah, that's good. Great point. I always say the main point that everybody should be reaching for eventually, you might have to do carnivore for a set period of time, or keto or OMAD, like you said, short periods of time to heal the system or to burn up some fat. But the goal is to be metabolically flexible. You want to be able to come out and eat a bunch of fruit and maybe some carbs if you can tolerate them, and then be able to move back into ketosis the next day if you so please.
Right. And when someone's fat adapted, and that's what we teach in our keto courses, we talk about that you do all these things to get into ketosis, you become fat adapted, everything's smoothly run along, you lost all this weight. Okay, we want you to have some carbs. You want us to what?
Yeah.
You want us to what?
That's what I say too. Okay, now eat the carbs.
Just have some carbs. And we teach people how to do carb up, days to like purposely pull themselves out of ketosis. Because, a big thing is that you want your thyroid to work correctly. And in order to do that, the body needs CO2. And CO2 is a byproduct that the body makes from processing carbohydrates. So there's other ways that it can happen as well, but that's a main way that it does it. So when we remove those carbohydrates, our CO2 levels can go really low, which initially is not going to cause any trouble for a lot of people. But over a long period of time, that's one problem that it can cause, is that it's going to cause some thyroid issues because you don't have enough CO2 for that system to operate correctly. But another problem is that CO2 is acidic in the bloodstream. And when the pH of the blood goes out of balance, and here's a big piece of information that a lot of people don't hear, because a lot of people hear, oh, I'm too acidic, I need to have an alkalizing diet, I got to alkalize. But the problem is that a lot of people, probably half, are already leaning to alkaline in their bloodstream. And when the bloodstream is too alkaline, then it creates this thing called the Bohr Effect that we all learned about in the 8th grade in science class. But then for some reason, all of science forgot about it beyond that 8th grade science book. Because when the blood leans too alkaline, it makes the blood oxygen retentive, where it holds on to the oxygen. Now the oxygen can't get down to the tissues where it needs to be, where it needs to do all of its jobs. So it creates a lot of problems with, energy production, and it's kind of freaking the body out and stressing the system. So this is one of those other problems that can happen over a very prolonged period of time of allowing the blood to start leaning too alkaline. So when that's going to affect somebody is really different, because some people, like if somebody's bloodstream is leaning too acidic, then you're helping them out by removing those carbs and reducing that CO2 level. That's a big help to the body. A lot of people will have other systems working that will help balance out the pH of that blood, even though the CO2 is going down. So they can do these things a lot longer. You get emails from them that say, I'm doing this 2 years straight and I feel fantastic. And that's because you should. It's all working for you and your unique bioindividuality. It's good job.
Yep.
It's not really because you're brilliant. You just accidentally have your body set up in a way that it's thriving under the diet that you're currently using. So there's a lot of things to look at when it comes to all of those things that are working so great for everybody right now. You know, but there's a lot of things to look at no matter what diet you're going to use, really.
Yeah. And so just take the blinders off. That's what I always tell people. Just take your blinders off and let go of the dieting dogma and just be open to finding out what's going to work for you, because it's going to be completely different than your sister or your coworker or your husband or whoever.
And step away from the one-sided support group.
Oh, I was going to
Step
say that. Yeah.
away from the keto police.
Yes. Oh, I'm part of all these keto groups
Sure.
because I used to run keto programs for women. And I still, occasionally I'll go jump into them. And without a doubt, every day there's somebody on there that says, I've stopped losing weight, or, I can't lose weight on keto. What am I doing wrong? And you'll get, 500 people commenting, and they're all saying the same thing. You're not doing it right. Cut your carbs down farther, go down to
Fast
10 grams,
longer.
fast longer, do a 3-day fast, do a 7-day fast, do one meal a day. And I'm like, oh, you poor person, you are going to destroy yourself thanks to the advice of all of these people.
Right. And it's just really tricky because, they're doing the best they can when trying to, give advice, because they're saying something that worked for them, and it may have worked for them because they were set up to withstand that situation. And, you know, some of those situations can still be very, very helpful if you first correct the things that are going wrong. And that's what we like to teach people how to do. Look, you can have these great weight loss results that you're talking about. It's not like you can't do it in a healthy way. That's not what we're saying. You can have all the keto or carnivore or fasting results. You just have to learn to work with your body instead of against it. And if you can do these things with your body, and you can understand when it's time to cycle in other things, don't have a great week and think that I need to do exactly what I did this week forever.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that. You're going to correct an imbalance by doing that, and then create an imbalance in the other direction. You have to understand that that could happen. There can't be balance unless there can be possible imbalances in both directions. So you got to understand how to look at your physiology and know when it's time to adapt, and be willing to adapt.
Yeah. And unfortunately, it's usually people will start at, maybe 50 total grams of carbs and they lose weight, but then they stop losing weight. So then the advice is now cut down farther, cut your calories, start fasting more. And they start to move this person over into this direction, when had the advice been eat some carbs for a week and then go back. And
Right.
guess what? That person will have lost weight without destroying their metabolism, because they've shocked it, not
Right.
just keep starving it out.
Right. Because there's this buffering system that, when mineral levels are very low, you can buffer that with higher carbs. When glucose is very low, you can buffer that with higher minerals, and the system will work correctly. So we find that if people are having some trouble, they can use what we call just medium carb foods, where there are more carbs in what you're eating. They're not, they're not, they may be too high to put you into ketosis for a lot of people, and that varies from person to person too. But it allows you to buffer those low minerals you have and to function as a human being. At least you're not outside screaming at the mailman because you don't like his shorts, and you're like, why was I yelling at him? You're an emotional wreck. You don't have anything for your body to function on. So we teach people to raise your carbs up to a point that will allow you to function, but not so many carbs that you're still spiking that insulin so high. So maybe you're raising insulin, but it's to a point where it has time to come down again and allow you to access stored fat for fuel. So we like people to look at where they are before they decide, how many carbs they're going to have.
Mm-hmm. And is there things that you recommend when it comes to that bio individuality, like as far as tests go? Like, what can we do to really narrow this down? Or there's things that you like people to test for, lab work, things like that?
Right. There really is. And blood work is a little tricky because we can find valuable things in blood work, but blood is a compensatory fluid. And what that means is that the body needs the blood to be in line, and it needs to be functioning correctly, because if it goes too wrong in any certain areas, where we die on Thursday. So the body's like, okay, we don't want to die on Thursday. I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul, kind of a thing. And I'm going to steal from all these other systems to make the blood right. So that's why we can go to the doctor and everything looks great on the blood work, even though we know everything is not great. It's not in your head. It's not in your head. There's things going wrong, and you know it. You can feel it. So what we like to see people do is look at aspects of physiology that can give you hints of what's going on before the blood is going wrong. By the time the blood work is off, like, there's stuff really going wrong. Like, you really got some things you got to fix. So we like people to look at things like blood pressure and their pulse. And there's a lot that you can learn from your blood pressure, way beyond just the fact of, is it high enough that I need to be labeled, I need to have a drug for the rest of my life? There's a lot more information in blood pressure than just you have high blood pressure. So we like people to look at that. We like people to look at their breath rate. The rate at which we breathe can help us understand the pH of the blood, and whether we're drifting too far, and if it's creating oxygen utilization issues.
And how do you test that?
You test it. You really need a piece of equipment that we didn't have 60 years ago. It's called a smartphone, because a smartphone has a stopwatch on it.
I'm all waiting for, like, what's the machine?
Right? Yeah, you just need a stopwatch, and you just relax, and then you try to breathe as normal as you can, and then count your inhales until the timer goes off for 1 minute.
So
and
we're
the number
just
of
doing
inhales,
heart rate.
well, it's not really, yeah, we're not just doing pulse. This is like an inhale kind of thing. So if you inhale less than 14 times in a minute, then your blood may be leaning a little bit on the alkaline side. If you inhale more than 18 times in a minute, it may be leaning a little bit on the acidic side, which can create a whole different world of problems. So that's just one thing that we
How is
look at.
that compared? Sorry to cut you off. How is that compared to, like, peeing on a pH stick? Is that not accurate? I've heard it isn't, but
We have people check their urine and saliva pH as well, but not for the same reason that other people are doing it. Other people will tell you that the pH of the urine and saliva is the same as whatever the pH of the blood is. And if you're acidic in those measurements, then you're acidic in the blood. And they'll also tell you that the Avengers and Catwoman are real. So it's fiction, is all it is. Yeah. What do you mean?
Oh,
what do you mean, Santa Claus?
He is. He's real. He's real.
All right. So it's a nice story, but it's fiction. And we look at the urine of the saliva, and I mean, the pH of the saliva and your urine has nothing to do with your blood pH at all. Different compartments of the body are supposed to have different pH polarities. And when somebody says, hey, I'm too acidic, they don't know what they're saying, because we want the stomach to be very acidic. It needs to be very acidic, or we don't get nutrients from our food. So we want people to look at urine and saliva pH, because this gives us indications of what's going on with cellular permeability and whether our circadian rhythms are working correctly.
What? Why? How?
Because,
what? Why? How?
Right? Why? How? And we'll science it up real quick for a second. But let me tell you this. If your readers are like, what is he talking about? You can read my book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, and you can get it for free just by going to kickitnaturally.com/book.
I'll link to it in the show notes.
Okay. And I teach people how to run all these tests at home that you can just do yourself with stuff you can pick up at a pharmacy or a health food store or something like that. But humans, that's what we are. That's what we're thriving to be, is humans.
Yep.
Is during the day, we're supposed to be in this catabolic state at the cellular level. And that's where our body's better at creating energy. It allows tissues to break down so that they can be renewed and rebuilt. And all those things are supposed to happen during the day. And then at night, we're supposed to move into this anabolic state. And that's where, we can sleep. And while we're sleeping, the body, it repairs and it rebuilds and it does all these things that the body is supposed to do in that state. But for a lot of different reasons, people can get stuck in one state or the other. And imagine what happens if someone is in that breakdown state all the time. They never go into the rebuild state. I can't add any muscle, or I'm on the toilet all the time and I can't get off. And it's the body stuck in this state of, okay, let's purge all this junk and let's break it all down so that we can renew, but then it doesn't move into the renew state. So there's a lot of problems that can come from that, but there's also a lot of problems that can come if the person's stuck the other way. If they're stuck in that anabolic state, then they have to create energy through fermentation instead of other methods that the body's supposed to use during the day. And that can create really high lactic acid levels and create anxiety and constipation and all these other issues that can come along with that imbalance. So both of these states are correct. We want both of them to happen. They're both appropriate, but we're supposed to move back and forth. So if a person gets stuck in one state or the other, then it's going to create problems, and we want to help them correct that issue and move it to where they can go back and forth. So the urine and saliva pHs give us indications of to what's going on there. It's not the only thing that will let us know, but it's just something that gives us an indication. It's not diagnostic. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. I know what you're saying. But I love that kind of stuff. I love it.
It's so fun to
It's
geek
so
out
fun.
and just
be
such a nerd and make a lab rat out of yourself. And it's a lot of
Yeah.
fun. But what's even more fun is that you have this issue that you've been dealing with for a decade. Your mom and your grandmother had the same issue, but they pooped, twice a month. That's just how it was. And now I poop twice a month. So that's just how it is. But when you can look at your physiology and say, oh, here's an imbalance that happens a lot to people that can't poop at all. And I can take steps to improve that imbalance. And then they take the steps and they see the numbers changing. And then they start to poop like a champion. And they realize that I have the power to decide how I want my body to function. And when they're willing to do the work, it's just, they can change their life. They can fix things that they thought they were just dealt those cards and they were stuck that way.
Yeah. And you're right about the lab work too. I was going to say, I talked to a woman recently who went and I made her go and test her blood glucose go get a monitor and go test it. And it was 0.1 away from type 2 diabetes, 0.1. And the pharmacist told her, you're fine.
Oh my God.
And that happens all the time when people, like, even their hemoglobin A1C will be just under the cuff of type 2 diabetic.
Mm.
And they're like, oh, you're fine. Don't worry. Like, they get no flag. They're not told anything. And I'm like,
Right.
do you see, or their thyroid, do you see that you're 0.1 away from being flagged and your doctor's telling you have no problems?
Yeah, but I'm not there yet. I still got a 0.1 to go. That's fine.
Let's just wait till it's completely trashed.
Excuse me while I finish these Oreos and knock that up a 0.1. And I was actually in the same situation when I started trying to figure out my stuff. And we have people look at their fasting blood sugar as well. It's very valuable to understand what's going on. Not only to know, is it too high, but there's just as many problems that can come when it's going too low. Mm-hmm. And so we like people to understand what's happening. But I was 4 points away from being diabetic before I started to understand how to correct that.
Yeah. See?
And I was doing the thing of, oh, well, I'm going to go gluten-free because that's a popular diet. And that I must have gluten intolerance problems. So I'm going to go gluten-free. And so I'll go in the grocery store and I'll buy every single thing that says gluten-free on the package.
Gluten-free cookies. I'm going to get some gluten-free cereal.
I had gluten-free pancakes for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And I turned them into, I got gluten-free taco shells and I just dumped gluten-free golden grams in there. I thought that was healthy because people said it was, and oops, diabetic.
Yeah. And so in your book, do you you break down these little hacks that people can do or testing that people can do? And then do you point them towards a specific type of diet, or how do you do you point people towards things once they know the results?
Well, what we do is we create this map where you can just take your test results and you fill out your map and get an idea of where you might be imbalanced. And there's
Nice.
lots of places that you might be balanced. You're not required to be broken in every single area. If something's going wrong, maybe just one little thing. Maybe it's just that you can't digest your food, and that's all. I had a client that was 435 pounds, and he lost 235 pounds in a 12-month period. And the only thing we did was fix his digestion and lower his carbs. Everything else on
Wow.
his test was perfectly balanced. I'd never seen anything so balanced, but he was 435 pounds because his body was taking every problem that it experienced and just shoving it into fat cells to make it inert, to make it not a problem, so to speak. And so we like people to figure out what's going on with you. And if you have a significant imbalance, then we kind of show you here's some foods and supplements that can help balance out that particular imbalance. And then a person can kind of adapt a diet to fit themselves, to fit what's right for them. So, if a person really wants to do keto or one of these type of things, or carnivore, or maybe they really want to do a higher carb diet, then we can show them, is that a possibility for you? Will your body work in that situation? Because if a person's insulin resistant and you're going to
Mhm.
put them on a high carb diet, then you're
Not going to
giving
work.
them a burden. You're giving the body a burden. You're
Mhm.
saying, I see the way you're operating, but I'm going to tell you to do this anyways. And
Mhm.
it's just not going to work.
How often do you put some or suggest to somebody to maybe put more carbs in, like that they need a higher carb diet or a
A lot,
moderate carb diet?
a lot. And
Yeah, good.
it's when a person's blood pressure is so low that they're having mental and emotional issues, or we're seeing that stress hormones are causing other problems, then we absolutely want them on a higher carb diet, and not a high carb diet.
No.
Um, the reason that keto is so great for even some of these mental and emotional issues is because when the minerals are low and the person's eating very high carb foods, they get that spike in blood sugar and then they get that crash. And depending on how insulin is functioning, can depend on how hard that crash is going to be. And it's in the crash that real trouble happens. Because if a person ate no carbs, their blood sugar would stay on a more even keel. But if they ate a huge amount of carbs in one sitting, they create a crash where the blood sugar is way below it would have been if they ate none. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we like the high carb diets to just go away for most people. But we see a lot of people with low blood pressure and low mineral levels that need to eat more carbs than maybe most people are telling them to eat, until they can fix some of those problems and allow the body to function on other things.
Yeah. And when I say high carb, I should have maybe been a little more specific with that, because
We can
my
say high
idea of
load.
high carb is like 150 grams of carbohydrates
Right,
when
right,
standard American diet is hundreds and hundreds of carbs,
right. It's
right?
all the carbs.
Yeah.
Can you
So I don't
can you
mean
pass all
that.
the carbs?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm not saying go eat 400 grams of carbohydrates. Very few people need to do that, if
right.
any.
They just
So
don't.
no, they don't. So it's more about, yeah, I would say like moderate 100, 150 for people maybe with adrenal problems, thyroid
Right.
problems, things like
And
that.
there's a lot of people where that higher amount of carbs might make it harder for them to lose weight, or maybe they'll lose weight at a lower pace. But the thing that they need to realize is, if you're going to try to do something just to speed up weight loss, which is what we all want to do, we all want to look pretty naked, and whatever
Mhm.
our goal is to why we want to get rid of the weight. So we're in a hurry to do that. But when you understand that most people who are in a hurry just, they end up creating these issues that make it come back, and oh, it came back, but it came back double. So I don't like that. I don't like it to come back double. So if you can work with your body, move at the pace that your body wants to move, and just continue to do that, it becomes effortless. It becomes easy. When you're working with your body, weight loss is easy. And I know that might make some people angry to hear, but try it and see if see if I'm right. Because when you allow your body to function, you give it what it needs, and then you allow it to be in a position to lose weight, it just kind of comes off.
Yeah. And I think the issue is that we all want the quick fix. And because
Right.
we're being thrown quick fixes constantly, like there's no diet out there that, well, unless you talk to you or myself or Tony here, there's no diet that's going to be like, you know what, you just got to take this time and you got to go through all, do some testing and do
Uh-huh.
some self-exploration and,
Right.
listen to your body. Like people are like, what? That's too
Yep.
hard. I'm just going to go over here and do this 30-day quick fix, lose 10-pound diet.
Right. Yeah. It's been a week. I haven't lost 18 pounds like that guy on that competition show yet.
That
What's
commercial.
going on?
Yes, it's just life would be much easier, you guys, and if you would just take the time to
Simmer down. Yeah.
figure it out.
This is what I like to tell people. You don't have a photo shoot next week for the cover of a magazine. You don't have that. You're an accountant. So calm down, let it happen, and it will happen. If you try to be forcing it to happen, you're going to create a situation where it's going to get worse.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so tell us about your 3 podcasts. Which are they?
Chat the Fat is my keto podcast that tells people how to do keto the right way and when you should stop doing it. And I do that with Nissa Gron from Eating Fat is the New Skinny. She's a girl who just read one of my books and lost 100 pounds and then started learning more about keto and stuff and became an author. And so we just do some stuff together.
Nice.
We have some keto courses we do together and stuff like that. And then my other podcast is Six Figure Health Pro, where it's kind of a marketing podcast for health professionals because I have a membership for health professionals that teaches them how to do the stuff that we do and see great results with their clients.
And then Kick It Naturally.
And Kick It Naturally is the podcast. Pretty soon I'm gonna have this amazing guest that you guys got to hear. So just go there and search for Kick It Naturally, and you're gonna look for Karen, and then that's what you're gonna want to listen to.
And this conversation is going to continue.
Good. All right.
All right. I'll put all the links in the show notes, but it's at kickitnaturally.com/book. I can't wait because you've got some hacks that I do not know about, which I'm shocked.
Really fun. It's really fun.
I'm really hoping that I'll find that you don't have something that I know.
Oh, I'm sure.
That I can share with you and be like, oh, you missed this one.
It always happens. It always happens.
Yes, I can't wait. All right. Thank you so much, Tony Christopher, for coming on my show. And I look forward to speaking to you on your show.
Okay. Gonna be fun. Thanks for having me.